Hello, everybody, and welcome to the House Salt Book Club. This is the book club show and pick for November, even though we're having this live show in December. And we read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I am Marines. My channel is My Name is Marines, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars.
I'm Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. You're on my channel, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars.
I'm Paige from Minimal Bookie, and it's either a 4.5 or a 5. I'm in my feels right now, so
I'm Kayla from Bookadoodles, and I gave this 5 stars. It might be my favorite book of the year.
I'm Jordan from the Jordan Journals, and I think I'm going to give it like a 4-star.
Okay.
This is so best in a while. Yes, we
and it's a V.E. Schwab book. Like
welcome to the club.
This is the most 2020 thing.
Any bingo squares? Not mine.
So we're saying that because I guess we'll start here talking a little bit about each of our experiences with V.E. Schwab, whether we've read any of her work before, if we liked it or didn't like it. So that then our elation over liking this one might make more sense. So.
Well, I mentioned in the last live show, I was like, I really want V.E. Schwab to lower me into my grave so she can let me down one last time. Because she tends to do that with me. Like, I liked the very first book I read by her was The Archived, and I liked it. And then I didn't like the first 2 books in A Darker Shade of Magic, but I liked the finale. I liked Savage Song, but not Dark Duet. I'm very all over the place. I liked Vicious, but not the follow-up. So she's either a hit or a miss for me. And her concepts are always so good that I'm usually disappointed by a book because I go in with this is going to be amazing. And then when it's not, I'm super sad. So I'm all over the place with her, but I tend to be very cautious when going into one of her books.
Yeah, I've read her entire Darker Shades series, and I really like that one. As these guys know, I'm obsessed with that series. And I tried reading Vicious, but wasn't really a huge, I put it down midway through. I'll probably go back to it eventually, but it just wasn't what I was looking for. So I was kind of concerned going to this. I was like, is Darker Shade going to be the only series I like by her? Is this going to be a letdown? Am I going to be disenfranchised about her? And it turns out this was perfectly and exactly what I needed. So good job, V.E. Schwab.
So I only read Vicious by her at the height of its hype, and I didn't think it was worth all the hype that it was getting. So that's my only experience. But I knew going into this one that she's been working on it for so long, and it's her baby. And I kind of felt that way. I felt like you knew it was special the whole time you were reading it. So that was my experience so far with her.
I have read Vicious and The Savage Song by her, and I always really like the concepts that she comes up with, but the execution always lacks for me, and I always am struggling through 90% of the book, and then the last 10% is normally where I'm really enjoying myself. So normally they're not that great reading experiences for me.
Yeah, same. So I mean, not same, and also probably even more because I read Vicious and I liked it. I really enjoyed it. And then I read the first Shades of Magic one, and I think that is one of the worst books that I have ever read, to be honest. And I think it only gets worse in my feelings because people really enjoy it. And I'm like, are you kidding? The world building, the characters, all of it sucks. So I don't understand that love. Then I went back and we reread Vicious for Snark Squad Pod, and rereading it, I was like, oh no, this is not good either. And primarily because of the female characters. So that's when I really started to get on that train of oh, maybe she doesn't know how to write female characters. And I tried to read The Near Witch, and I've DNF'd it 3 times because I get so bored. So that's my history. And I surprisingly liked this one, and I wasn't prepared to like it. So let's jump into discussing this. I think starting right at the top with Addie LaRue. Addie as a character, and the big question here, I guess, is she not like other girls?
I was so nervous that she was going to be. I actually, I think I was vlogging. Yeah, I was vlogging when I was reading this, and there was a couple points where she does some stuff that she's done with fucking Lila Bard that I was like, oh no, and I got like nervous. But then it didn't go that far. Like she didn't take it that hard, and this is an opportunity that she really could have. Like I was very leery that it was going to feel like a manic pixie dream girl, and she didn't, in my opinion, for me. I think that she could have definitely swayed that way, but the fact that it was like very external, and the fact that like she's literally almost like, yeah, like she's this one time only meeting for these people, and she is this, you know, doesn't have a lot of say in her life and all this kind of stuff, but she still didn't feel like that. And she didn't go on any like monologues about really like, I mean, at the very beginning she did with her friend a little bit. There was a little bit at the beginning when she was like, I don't want to be the wife and I don't want this life and blah, blah, blah. But that didn't keep going, where she's had other characters that have flat out done monologues about not being like other women. So, I mean, and she didn't have the experience of like getting to have female friends. We didn't get to see like that kind of connection, but I get the sense that if she could have, she would have, and she would have had really good female friendships. So yeah, I didn't get that sense, although I was very leery when she wanted to dress like a boy and some of these things that she's done with other characters, but she managed to soften it this time, and I'm very happy she did.
And I feel like she grounded all of it. Like that stuff I was like, they're going to think like she's not like other girls. Like that is very much like the trope in those situations. But she grounded it in the reality of the situation that Addie was in and the time period. And of course, she's going to have these thoughts. Like if she doesn't want to conform to the life that is expected of her, which is like the entire arc of her journey, she doesn't want to conform to this, and that's all she's allowed at the time. So it made sense for the motivation of the character in this situation versus other times where it's just used to make them unique in some way.
Yeah, I had the same thing in the beginning. I thought, like, immediately when she was like, I don't want to get married. I'm not like the other girls in the village. I was like, B.E. Schwab, Victoria, do not do this to me, like, in the first, like, couple of chapters. And I think it did eventually, like, soften that piece of it. However, I'm going to say that there was a touch of Manic Pixie Dream Girl here. And I think that there were pieces, like, that I can explain to myself, like why that is probably not the case, and how, like, you know, she is probably forming or conforming into what everybody wants, and she has all of this experience, and that's why they're falling for her, and that's why she's like a muse to all these artists. But I don't think that the text went like hard enough on explaining that to us, so it just came across like she's so beautiful and all of these artists just fell in love and she was their muse. And I don't know. I don't think we saw enough of why that was, or enough of her personality to really be like, oh, I get why everybody falls in love with her. It felt a little, I don't know, icky to me.
See, I like took that as like kind of what you were saying as far as what we can read into with the description of, like, you know, how long she's been alive and stuff, that she like made herself into that, you know, like it's not necessarily because it's like, oh, she's just this like unique person. She's like, no, I know what to say. Like I've done this. Like, the fact that they keep saying like she's done this so many times, and the fact that like they also point out to a lot of these people that she has like relationships with them, and they just, you know, they don't know her obviously, but she like knows how to hook them. Like the fact that she, like, I think there was the one, this wasn't with a romantic person, but the woman that she met, like, and I had to go to her salon, and she's like, I've been trying to do this for like 2 weeks and now I know exactly what to say. That sort of gave me the idea that she's like done this with like most of the people that have fallen in love with her. Like she's not wormed her way in, because that makes it sound malicious, but like she's gotten to know them, and we just didn't see every single time. So, but there was definitely that, like, yes, it almost felt like, for me, Manic Pixie Dream Girl adjacent, because it could have definitely gone fully that way, and for me it didn't. Because I was like, well, I see all the external factors going on here that make that not quite true, but that it would feel that way if we didn't know her whole like story and stuff.
And I think like all the pieces were there, so it's like a matter of whether like you as a reader were like, oh, okay, taking those pieces and like interpreting. But I can also see people reading this and not fully like getting there, or not feeling like Schwab did enough to kind of explain that portion of it.
For sure.
And I feel like part of it is like she's making the choices of who she's leaving her impact on. Like it's not just like the guy's fault. We're not seeing from the guy's perspective where he just falls for her. We're seeing her make calculated choices. Like the only one where I feel like she didn't really make the choice was the guy who was like drawing her in bed when she was just like sleeping, and she just happened to be really hot, and he was like, I need to draw her. But like some of the situation, like Toby, the singer, she purposefully helped him with this, and like she is performing being the muse, and because that's the one way she can leave her impact on the world. So it's like a performance for her, like actively.
Yeah.
I also got Manic Pixie Dream vibes a couple times. I don't know exactly what it is, and I can't really pinpoint it, but I don't know if you guys ever read the graphic novel The Sculptor,
Yeah.
but that's
Oh,
I think Sam did, but
I did, yeah.
that has major Manic Pixie Dream vibes, and it's like a guy finds girl, changes his life, has a year to live or whatever. And obviously it's done much better here. But I don't know. I guess with Henry, like from Henry's point of view, I just felt like sometimes, like at times, that they fell in love way too quickly. But again, for their situations, it made sense. But yeah, that's my take on it.
I see some people also saying like in the chat like about whether or not they liked her personality or she had enough personality. There was one, it took me about 130 or 40 pages to get into this. But I will tell you that my turning point for her as a character is when basically she made that first decision of being like, oh, this is a game to you? You want me to surrender? No. And that's when I was like, my girl, I don't know, the pettiness of that, the pettiness of her, like 300 years, like I'm not going to surrender. I loved that so much. I call me, maybe because I see another petty spirit and I immediately am like, yes. But I don't know. I think that did a lot of characterization for me, like sort of how her bravery, just her willingness to keep living, the way that she kept finding beauty in different things. So it didn't feel like characterization necessarily like she likes this or that, but I felt like I was still, like my heart was going out to her and I was rooting for her too.
Yeah, I think it took me a little bit of time too to like really start attaching to her, because at first what drew me into the book was just like the atmosphere of it, and like, you're making a deal with like an old god or darkness or the devil, and I'm like, absolutely, like very into that. But it did take me a little bit of time, and it was those moments when it's like it became more calculated, and when she was trying to get around her curse more, like when she really started to learn, how to do this and how to live like this. Like there were some parts at the beginning that were like very sad, because it's just like, oh God, this is really awful for you. But those moments where she's also still able to hold on to the good parts of life, like I really appreciate that about her. I'm like, wow, like that, the strength of a character to be able to like really see these horrible things and then also find these beautiful moments is really cool, I thought. Nicole made a good point in the chat that the hot guy who drew her was totally her muse. Like he was the one who made her go, okay, wait, I can use this, which I think was also a good point.
Yep.
I also started feeling like sympathy, like empathy for her. Like I started rooting for her when Remy like put the coins into her hand. Like that was just heartbreaking to me. Like I like actually I was like, "Ooh, that is a tough deal to deal with." Like like it feels.
Yeah, this book is just one whole serving of sad. Like I'm just tearing up thinking of it. Like I was like telling them I was laying in my bed, like as soon as I finished it for half an hour, just in my feels about everything that happened.
We usually get to like themes and stuff at the end, but I think that a lot of this that we're talking about, like the sadness of it, but how that eventually like her determination and everything is like what won me over to her. Like, but also just a lot of like, I don't know, the world sucks, but you keep finding like good things in it. And like time is like going by, and I feel like this manic, like I need to do something. That's like pandemic vibes. Like, so the whole time I was like, I get this. Life does suck, but sometimes things are beautiful, but also time is running away. And what the heck are we doing? So it was like a very big pandemic vibe book for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving on from Addie, how did you guys like Henry as a character?
I think, if anything, Henry was like the manic pixie dream boy. Like if anything, I did like him. What I really liked about him was the juxtaposition that he provided between Addie not really having any relationships and him having very close ones, and the ways that we see how he interacts with people and stuff, which is just so opposite to obviously her situation. So I really liked that about him, and just like I do think that he was more that like, okay, he's the perfect fit for her scenario. And that's what kind of like we talked about earlier, where it's like, okay, they fell in love too quick. And I actually didn't feel like they fell in love. I think the book did a good like thing with pointing out where she kind of said multiple times, she's like, I don't know if this is love, but it's enough. And I really liked that too. I was like, oh, you're not telling me they're in love. Like, that's fantastic. Great job, Victoria. Because I feel like she tends to do that, to be like, they love each other. And I'm like, stop. So yeah, I really liked that where she's like, it doesn't necessarily have to be this like love thing, but we are very important to each other because of this situation, and being kind of like realistic about that, but also being like, you know, the fact that he was another example of like the beauty she saw in the world, where she's like, this boy like deserves, you know, more of a chance than this darkness guy that it almost feels like, and we're gonna get to like Luke, but like it feels like she created him, so she had some kind of like responsibility for like, you know, this character who's now affecting other people's lives, even though he's been around. But he definitely felt like this extension of her in a lot of ways too. But anyway, getting sidetracked. But I liked Henry, but he felt less fleshed out necessarily than Addie was.
Yeah, I really liked his, like, when he was first introduced as a perspective that we got, I really enjoyed it because it was like a nice juxtaposition to everything we've been getting from Addie, especially when we finally realized like what his like deal was, and like the reasoning behind it made me very sad, because I feel like, not to get into the Enneagram stuff, but Addie's definitely a 4. I discussed this with her. She feels like she's an individual, like she wants to like make her own mark in the world. But I feel like Henry's a 3 because he wants everybody to love him, which is what I am. And I was like, my baby boy, when I like read that whole backstory, I was like, okay, I will die for you. You are like literally my fave now.
Yeah, he's sweet.
There were a lot of passages that he had on like loneliness and feeling lost and like not knowing your way. And I was like, I resonate with you so much right now, that he like made me love him so much more.
Yeah.
I also I think hearing you guys talk about Henry, like now I'm thinking that this is true for Addie too, but I feel like for both of them, I didn't really know much about maybe like their personalities, but I did know a lot about their struggles. And that's why I felt like I liked them as characters, because totally same, like everything that Henry was going through about like not loneliness, like feeling lost, wanting to do everything, but not knowing how to do anything. And the entire scene at his parents' house after like the first time he has the curse, where they're just being like, we love you, we're proud of you, and it's all he ever wanted, but it's also fake. That whole thing was so heartbreaking to me, just for like the feeling of like, haven't we all been there when we wanted somebody just to like accept us and be supportive of us? And like it took this much for him to get that, to get like the love and support of his family. So I was like a wreck through that whole scene. But in general, my heart went out to Henry, not because at the end of the day, I know much about him. Like, I don't know much about his personality, but his struggles, I saw them, I feel them.
Yeah. It's definitely like a very relatable character. I mean, he's definitely a water sign. Like, if we're going to pull in the Enneagram, he's a water sign. I just really, there were those moments when he described the mental health stuff and the fact that like he considered his mental health like a storm. I really liked that like metaphor that he used, because I think using that, I've used that before when talking about like mental health flares, like, oh, a storm's rolling in, because our emotions and things are ever changing, and storm and weather metaphors for that are like really good for that kind of thing. So I appreciated that as well. But yeah, the family dinner thing was, as somebody who's one of my primary love languages is like words of affirmation, I was like, oh no, like everyone was giving me praise and I didn't think it was genuine, like the pain that would cause. So yeah.
Even when he was talking to like his friend and she was like, you're a wonderful friend, and he's like, that's a total lie because I'm not a good friend. I was like, I'll give you a hug.
But speaking of that conversation with him and Bea, what I really liked about him and Bea's friendship was that there was this implication that she was less frosted over because she really did love him so much. Like their dynamic didn't change as much, and I was like, oh, like that was so sweet, because it was just like, yes, she still has some like rose-colored glasses on with him, but it's almost like she always did, and I thought that was really pure.
Like she's the most true person in his life.
Yeah,
or she sees him the best out of anybody in his life. Like. So even in that moment where he's like, I'm not a good friend, but the words she says right after is, I wish you could see yourself the way that I see you. So he didn't feel like a good friend in that moment, but she still was kind of like affirming, like, it's cool, dog. I think like you're a good friend. It's fine. Like what you have to offer is enough. So just, the whole thing also made me very emotional.
Also, Henry would definitely be a Pisces because of how deeply he feels everything. You're welcome. Goodbye.
Oh, gosh. Okay, I think we're going to move from the softness to Luke and darkness, the devil. I guess him as a character, but in general, Addie and his character and sort of that dynamic through the book. How'd you feel about it? How'd you like it?
I mean, I don't mean to go first because obviously this was like one of the reasons why, like, as soon as there was any inkling of like, ooh, are they flirting? I was like, What I really also liked about this dynamic was the differences between her and Henry and her and Luke, and the like. I don't think the book was explaining away the toxicity of her and Luke's dynamic. Like I liked that. It was like they had a lot of lines about like being drawn together and the fact that it's like he's the only one that knew her for hundreds of years, but also he did it on purpose. He's possessive. Like the book points out that, you know, so it wasn't excusing any of the ickiness about their dynamic, which made me be able to like it more because it's like, oh, the book knows that this is like an issue. And I liked their like combativeness and, you know, again, they're trying to almost like one up each other. And the some of the scenes when she was like, you're just as lonely as I am. And some of that, like those digs that she got at him, I was like, ooh, yes. But I really liked that in contrast to the very like sweet dynamic that her and Henry had.
And there's like an inevitability to it because, like you said, like they're the only person who knows each other the way that they know each other. So it was bound to happen at some point when you get to know somebody that deeply. So I was just like waiting and waiting and waiting for it to finally happen because they definitely hint at it towards the beginning. But also, I will just say I was telling them the audiobook, whoever that narrator is, her darkness voice in a way I was not expecting. It was good. So go listen to the audiobook if you haven't. That's all I'm gonna say. I was like finding myself at some point. It was real.
For some
go ahead.
For some reason I pictured Luke, even though it doesn't match like description wise, but I pictured him as Klaus the whole time. Like the way he talks and stuff, and I was like, oh, this is not good. Like I even wanted to like flip ahead to see like, do they get together? I know it's hinting.
That's so funny because like I pictured more of like a hint of Damon in him.
I just thought they had really good chemistry. Like Fire versus her and Henry, like Sam said, like was like more calm and more, you know, comfortable.
This is exactly this type of thing that is like built for me to not like, but I was surprised that, just like Sam said, like I don't think that it ever got to a place where we didn't know exactly who this person was and what he was doing. And so there were times where I felt for Addie because yes, if there's only one person in 300 years who knows who you are and who can remember you, like I'd feel a little some type of way about that person too. And you know, even the thing like he took the form of like this person that she crafted as like her ideal, like so there were a lot of things where I understood why like the attraction is there and all of that stuff, but we never got away from, you know, this is actual literal darkness. And so I ended up really liking that dynamic.
Yeah, the fact that there was no excusing of his behavior is what I really liked, because as we talked about before, like I do like villain dynamics with like main characters. However, I am not the kind of shipper that's like, he's baby. I'm always like, no, he's still a bad dude. And like a lot of times the books will kind of like brush that under the rug. And this didn't. Like she very much said all the way through the end, like he's fickle, he's possessive, he calls me like my Adeline. He's this way and that way, and so like the book never excused his behavior, so you can kind of enjoy like the angst of it all and like the combativeness of it all without being like, ew, this is icky, because it's like the book is showing and like they're both very much knowing what's going on. Like it's not like you never felt like he was like manipulating her more, like it's towards the end when they're like more equals. I never felt like, oh, she doesn't have any power in this, you know, then it would have been really gross. So I felt like she was really getting like to one up him in a lot of ways, and so it made it more equal in that way for me.
And it never felt romantic or like love.
Yes.
It was just like this attraction, weird, like back and forth, and it, you know, so it never felt like the book was like, isn't this lovely? And
or like, look, a relationship or a girl has softened him and made him a better person.
Right,
that
right.
Never got there.
Yeah.
Kayla, you were gonna say?
I just said like even in their like first like when they first get together, even in like that chapter, the next chapter, like she doesn't hear a heartbeat or anything when she's like laying on his chest, and it just really reminds you of like be aware of the situation. Like don't just be like, oh no.
No, he's got a forest in his chest.
Don't know what's going on there.
All right, so I think we've mentioned a little bit as we're talking through, but so this book, I don't even know like what I want to get at here, but I guess the structure of the book, this is like a slow book.
Mm-hmm.
It is atmospheric. There are different timelines, so we're jumping back and forth in Addie's timeline from like the past when she made the deal to 2014 in New York. Then we add Henry in, and we're jumping back to like when he made his deal, and then joining them back in the present as well. So how'd you feel about like, I guess the structure, the atmosphere? Was it too slow? Was it just right? I don't know. Well, all of that.
I feel like it was a little too long for me because there was at some points like when we were going to her past toward like the latter half of like the second act where I was like, okay, like this is like dragging again like it was in the beginning. If you cut a couple chapters, it might have like improved the pace for me. But like you said, it's like 100 pages or so for me to really get into it. I was enjoying the atmosphere, but it felt like because there isn't really a plot to it, it's more like these are the characters, this is their situations, what are they going to do with like everything they're given, which I normally really enjoy. But because it's partly kind of fantasy, usually those are like plot driven sort of stories, so it was like a weird balance for me. I did like the conceit though that like Henry was the one writing, like physically writing the story, and that it ended up being a book. Like I'm a sucker for that when that happens. Like whenever it feels like so impressive to me, even though it really is so common now in stories for that to be a trope. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I love a good dual timeline when there's two things that are going to converge at the end and you don't know like how they meet together. Like that's one of my favorite things in stories. So like once we got into like the later half of the book where we were racing like against the time constraint of it, that was when I thought like the pacing was really good because there was like more of like a plot involved. But like the first half, it took me longer than 100 pages to get into it. It took me like maybe half the book to get into it. But then once that started happening, I felt like the pace picked up a lot.
I didn't really have slowness issues. I'm a sucker for really short chapters, and like when they're short chapters or like short sections, it just makes me feel like the read in general goes quicker. So I didn't really feel like a slowness aspect. I did love the narration, the way the story was told. It kind of, not that it's the same at all, but it kind of gave me the Name of the Wind vibes because it felt like someone was sitting you down and being like, let me tell you a story like around a campfire, you know, just like that cozy, like familiar feeling. So I definitely love the structure of this for sure.
Yeah, I think that actually V.E. Schwab does these kind of time jumps pretty well in books I've read by her, because I actually liked that dynamic also in Vicious, which is a little bit more like obviously past and present and doesn't skip the way that this does, but I thought she did that well there. So yeah, it didn't really bother me, and I kind of liked that it meandered a bit in the sort of like slowness. Like it didn't ever feel slow to me. Like it just felt, again, like atmospheric. Like we were just soaking in everything and soaking in what she was doing and her experience. Like we were living her experiences with her. So I thought all of that had some good substance to it. I agree that there was a couple chapters that had been cut and it would have been like just as good. But I was also like totally okay with that. And just kind of, I was liking to see like, okay, where is this going to go? How do we end up here? There were some references to like the New Orleans and like some of that kind of stuff and like different things that had happened, but not in a way that I felt like, oh my God, I have to keep reading in like a thriller way, but more in like a quiet way. As far as comparisons to other books, it's actually reminded me a little bit of The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. That like the way that weaves and just the way that talks about like art and stuff too, as far as like themes and stuff. I felt very similar to that. So I don't mind a good atmospheric read.
It was definitely more of a commercial Starless Sea. I would feel like it was more commercially written versus like the literary version of
The Starless Sea is a dense beast, but like
but I loved it though. Yeah. That is like this is like just below that for me.
Right.
It was too slow. So that's why I cannot give this like a 5-star. Even in books that I love, where you have to say something like you have to give it 100 pages. To me, like whether or not a reader is willing to do that, that's up to everybody. But to me, that usually is a flaw in a book. Like if it takes you 140, 50 pages to really feel like your story is coming together, to me, that's a flaw, and that's not a 5-star book. So that's kind of my rating style. But I kept expecting it to come together at a piece, and I was telling myself it's slow at the beginning, but it's building something, because that's how Vicious was for sure. Like, it took half that book where we were going back and forth until it came together, and I was like, oh, and it made all the stuff at the beginning really feel like important and special. Here, things came together and I was enjoying it, but a lot of that beginning stuff didn't feel like we really needed it. Like, maybe for like a general, like, long and ambly feeling, but not like a storytelling perspective. We could have cut some of those chapters altogether, and I don't think it would have materially made a difference to the story. So I'm team, it was probably too long. But in the end, I did enjoy, for the most part, like, the atmosphere of it. And I know, Kayla, you said like the shorter chapters or whatnot like help you read. The shorter chapters were bothering me so much because I felt like nothing was happening. And so it'd be like we'd be like 3 pages and then like Back to the Future. But nothing happened in the past. Why are you taking me like Back to the Future? Like I needed like something more to like hold on to. So Sam, I'm sorry, but I like sped through those beginning chapters. I know you were like, Maddie, read it slow, and I'm like,
each chapter was like so short that it equated to like a percent of the ebook I was reading. And I'm like, ooh, I'm making such good progress.
I love a short chapter as well. I'm with Kayla. I'm like, I know that that's like a Dan Brown phenomenon, but I'm like, listen, I read the Dan Brown book so fast because of those short fucking chapters. Like, he did that on purpose. So I like the short chapters. And I think what I like, again, I'm okay with it being the length that it was, and I would also be okay with them shaving off a bit. I think the thing that might have happened if shaving off a bit, and I don't know because I don't have like exact references for this, but she might have fallen more into some of those like manic pixie tropes and things like that if we hadn't seen more of her life fleshed out. So I think having her life fleshed out, like, I was also really nervous about her being like such a good thief. I thought that was going to get pointed out a lot because Lila Bard. So I was real nervous about that, but the fact that we saw these like very casual thief instances, and enough of those, like, even though sometimes it was redundant, it was like, oh, like, well, her life was redundant, you know, like, that's what her whole life was, just a series of repeats all the time. So us being a little bored, like, well, she was probably a little bored, you know. So I kind of dug what that was doing for the themes.
Did you guys like the past or the present more? I was more invested in her past, like building up to the past.
I'm present hardcore, especially in the beginning. I was annoyed by the past chapters. I was like, I just want to know what's happening now. When's she gonna meet Henry? Like, I was like waiting for it to happen.
A long time to meet Henry, because that's in the synopsis, right? Where it's like she meets a boy that remembers her, and I was like, what is this boy? Like, what is going on?
I didn't read the synopsis, so I didn't know a boy was coming, so I was team pass. Every time it was like 2014 New York and she woke up, I was like, boo!
Once Henry's point of view was introduced, that's when the story like really took off for me. So I could have done with a lot less of everything that happened before that.
I saw earlier in the chat, and it like left me now, but we talked about Addie and we talked about Henry, but somebody says that they didn't see that there was like chemistry between Addie and Henry. Did you like them together, Addie and Henry?
I did.
I thought they were sweet. They didn't like they weren't as like tension filled as obviously she was in Luke, so it was a different experience. But I thought they were very sweet, and like I felt bad that they didn't get to enjoy it for longer than they did. Like, it felt bittersweet in that sense.
Yeah, they felt so like innocent, and like, again, like the vulnerability there that he brought her, because she had to be so much more like, I don't know, like, not hardened, but there was something about her character that obviously had to be a little bit more like invulnerable and stuff. So I think they felt like almost like a teen couple that, like, the first time, almost like they're almost falling in love but not quite, like that dynamic, and like getting to do new experiences together. Like, I just thought that was really sweet and cute. But yeah, it wasn't, my bones were not hurting, so therefore, like, I wasn't like as
That's the true test. My bones are okay.
Am I aching in my body? No.
Yeah,
it
wasn't
like
like
I was
steamy
sad when they didn't get to spend a lot of time together, and it like hurt me that it ended so quickly.
Yeah.
But it was more like sweet than bones hurting.
Yeah. And it was like, you know, like we said, just like it felt sort of like inevitable that they would like each other just because of their curses and how that ended up. So them like figuring that out, it wasn't necessarily like love at first sight and like you're the man for me. It was just like, wow, you're the literal other only man. Let's make this work. So I like, yes, I did. I also did not. My bones never hurt. I didn't. I'm sure. What's my equivalent? I didn't cry about it, but I did. Like appreciate their relationship and the sweetness of it, and several moments where they were trying to like figure themselves out and their curses, like where he's like, "Is this real?" And she's like, "Will he remember me?" Like those things were really sweet, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. One other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I will admit that we kind of talked about this a little bit before we came on live. So this is also more like of a question for the chat. But as I was like scrolling through and seeing just like general star ratings on Goodreads, I actually went to Sam's and saw that she gave her a 5-star, and there was a comment about the mental health rep in here. So I posed this question to everybody, but to you guys in the comments as well. If there was anything in here about the mental health rep that you thought was done badly or poorly or done well, like did you pick up on anything while you were reading?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, because we were kind of talking about it before we signed on, and I mentioned earlier that as somebody that works in mental health, I didn't see, and someone that also has mental health issues, I didn't see anything that was really like, I can see how some things people will be like, well, that's not my experience, but that's the whole thing with rep. Like, not every rep is going to be completely your experience, but I actually thought that like the depiction of like depression or whatever it was that Henry was going through, because it was never labeled, I actually kind of liked how she did that, because it was more open and kind of vague. Like obviously he has some like suicidal ideation, like all of that stuff, but it's not necessarily like full-blown depression. It could be some anxiety, it could be a lot of different things, and so I felt like that was a thing that a lot of people could relate to depending on what someone was struggling with. So I actually thought that was done pretty well, and I even liked how they talked about some of the medication stuff. Like he used medication, so it wasn't like one of those books that's like, ew, medicine doesn't work. Like he was like, no, I'm using it. And he referred to it as like the little umbrellas, because his mental health is like a storm. I actually thought that was, again, like kind of a sweet thing and a really good metaphor for mental health stuff.
Yeah, the one thing that when I was reading, I was thinking like people might have like a problem when they're reading this book with this was like the whole like him throwing away his life because of his mental illness, which is never like described. I could see why somebody would get stuck on that and be like, I don't like this element of representation. I felt like it was fully developed further when like it's his final scene where he thinks he's gonna die and he's like, I'm not ready to die now. I wasn't ready to die then. That felt like understandable and like realistic. Like there's still a fear of death despite the fact that you feel like it's your only choice in that moment. So I feel like it did come full circle, but I could understand if somebody like saw that and was like, well, this rubbed me the wrong way in a little bit, because I did pause for a minute and just had that thought in my head while it was happening when it was described.
Yeah, I think there was something to be said too for when there is suicide in books, because it is, you know, obviously like a very delicate topic, but I think like that thought that people have when they are suicidal is like very real. Like people do think like, I can't do this, like I can't, you know. So I think him having that thought was like, that is what the thought that people have when they want to do that, you know. So even that point is like, well, that's kind of a pretty real experience, even if it's something that makes you uncomfortable. It's like, well, yeah, like that is uncomfortable. That does suck. And people do experience that. So someone was mentioning the like substance abuse and some of that like stopping pretty suddenly, which I guess I didn't pay a ton of attention to. I mean, I paid attention to this. I knew he had substance abuse, but I didn't really pay attention to the amount of time that it took away or when it stopped or anything like that.
I think somebody, I saw somebody else say also like anxiety. I, as somebody who also has anxiety, there were like a lot of descriptions that were just like hit home.
Yeah.
And particularly like right at the beginning when he was describing just feeling too much, like that whole description and like passage was one that I was like immediately like, oh my gosh, like I don't know, it hit home too, just that entire idea of like being broken on the inside because you can't seem to process things the way that other people do or that other people expect you to. And it feels like too much. Like I was like, oh yes, that landed.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about like oh, go ahead, Kayla.
I just want to say, like, I suffered from depression like the last at least 15 years, and like I definitely related to a lot of Henry's thoughts and chapters, and I think it was done really well personally.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking of the substance abuse thing. It looks like it when you're reading it, it felt like he was doing it in reaction to like his emotions. So it felt understandable to me. Like certain points he's gonna probably binge drink and other times he won't. I feel like that is something that I see a lot in like my own circle with people. So I feel like that was an aspect of it. Like it might not be relatable to a lot of people, but like where I am now is definitely something that some people deal with, like their emotions, they'll binge drink. And then when they're in a good spot, they won't drink at all.
Yeah.
But then it's like back and forth. So I think like that's probably what I assumed was happening while like he was drinking when he was sad and depressed. And then when he wasn't, he didn't feel like he needed to turn to the alcohol as much.
Right. Yeah, because not just because someone's using doesn't mean that they're necessarily using all in the same way, like an addiction type thing. Like again, using it almost as like a self-medicating thing, it is going to be much more sporadic.
So I mentioned now like a few like passages where I was like, ooh, this hit home. But at the beginning, I felt like she was maybe doing too much, like it was overwritten. But then I settled in and like my emo heart was so happy with certain like descriptions. Like, and I was like, this might still be overwritten, but I think I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
And it definitely does have that like angsty emo, like sort of like, feel. And I think she was going for more of like maybe literary feel, but it ends somewhere more commercial, I think. But there were still like lines and passages in here that I would put on a Trapper Keeper or like an AOL away message. Like there were things in here that I was just like, ooh, feelings, yes.
Yeah, for sure. It almost didn't
Absolutely.
feel like written by her. Like it almost, I don't know. There was parts of this that I was like, this feels like someone else. Like obviously it was her. I'm not saying like that's not the implication. I'm like saying just to be really clear. It's been a weird week. I don't want anyone to make any assumptions. But like,
thoughts on so bad. Plagiarized.
Ghostwritten.
You have a signed copy you're trying to sell.
But like it definitely had this other like she has a way of writing usually that is so much more, in my opinion, like in your face. And this did feel much more like, I don't know, not quite purple, but like almost like it was stepping towards that. So yeah, but there were some lines in here that I was like, ooh, girl, good job.
I like never highlight in my Kindle, and I was like,
feel like it was
highlighted like, a bunch of times. Sorry, Jordan.
I do think it was written differently from the other two books that I read by her. It felt very differently written.
Yeah. All right. So we've come to the last thing that I wanted to ask you about. So I'm going to ask you guys, but I'm also, if there's anything, two things that I want to ask you. But if there's anything that we haven't covered and somebody wants to put in the chat, or if you have questions for us specifically. So let's get to the end. How did you feel about the end? How the story ended?
Yeah.
How'd you feel?
Loved it. I loved it.
Yeah. It was a lot more hopeful than I thought it was going to be, but I still was like sobbing. Not my fault, but like also I am emotionally devastated by everything that's just happened.
Yeah. I cry for everything these days, just so you know, but also I finished this book and like just thinking about it makes me want to cry still. And I didn't even like really know why. Like it took me a minute to like sit down and be like, Madi, why are you crying right now? And I think it was a little bit more. I was expecting that she was going to die at one point. And then as we kept going on with Henry's story, I was like, oh, he's going to die. And then I was like, someone's going to die. Like it didn't end that way. So I think it was like a little bit more like Paige said, like a little more hopeful, but then also like at the end where she just gets like her final dig in of like, this is the new game. That is what attracted me to her in the first place, was like that grit and that like pettiness, I guess. So to see it again come up at the end and to see also that she still had hope. Like not only is Henry out there living his life, and not only is her name on all of these people's lips now, which she never had before, but she still had like a plan and a hope for her own life of getting free eventually. And after 323 years, like there's something really hopeful and beautiful about that. So I was just like, emotions.
Yeah. I definitely I really like very ambiguous kind of endings, and I feel like this definitely had that, where we're like, okay, like we don't know what her like ultimate ending is. And someone said in the chat like, oh well, she just gets to be annoying to Luke for eternity, and it's like, no, it's not going to be eternity. Like she says, she points out, I love when endings tie up how many things are referenced earlier, because she mentions his moods and his moodiness a ton. But I didn't really notice that until the end, when she was like, oh, he is super moody, and she knows how his moods go. So she knows how to, like you were saying, get to him and be kind of like petty and stuff. So I really appreciated that, like, she ultimately like took a lot of power back, like she has the whole book, but she took so much power back by not only being remembered and having her name being said out loud to a bunch of people, but also tricking him into a deal. It's like, ooh, yes, good, awesome. And I just like that kind of like, okay, now we don't know what happens. It's not necessarily sad or happy, it's just there. And that felt very true for this particular book.
Yeah, so I'm just reading, some people liked it, some people didn't like it. So, I think that, like, for instance, like, leaving it to the reader to figure out that her deal was clever. I don't think I would have noticed. Honestly, I would have been like, oh man, she's with him forever.
Right.
So it took her being like, and not only that, but I think that it was such a moment for her, because the whole thing is that she got into this deal without necessarily realizing all of the like ways that he used it against her. So for her to come on this end and use a deal against him, I think that there was something satisfying. Like, and was it on the nose for her to like be like, haha, like, sure, but it was satisfying for the story. And same sort of thing for like, the book is a bestseller. Like, is that a little bit on the nose? But yeah, the whole thing is that like all these people know her now, and she's lived all this time without people knowing her. So the fact that it was a bestseller, like, that felt satisfying to me, and it fit the story to me.
It made total logical sense. If there's a book that's said to be real, a memoir in a way with this kind of premise with no name on it, like sold as fiction, it would totally be a bestseller in this world, like 100%. Like, that was logic. I was like, this totally would track. It would 100% be at the top of the list.
And the dedication.
Literally, I sobbed out loud. I was listening to it and I cried. Like, I was not expecting it. Thinking about it, I'm like, oh no. But like, I literally physically let out a sob. I was like, this is too much for my soul.
That's your Cancer moon,
Yeah, it was a Cancer moon jumping out for real.
But something, this is like completely sort of unrelated, but there was something really nice when you were talking about this being like pandemic feels. I loved that the modern day stuff was in 2014. I don't know what it was about that I was just like, I'm so glad she started writing this in like 2014, because having this book accidentally set in like 2020 would have, I think, soured it a bit, which wouldn't have even been her fault, because we wouldn't have had all these things that she could have done. I would have been like, it's not really, like, I'm reading a book right now, Red, White, and Royal Blue, that has some stuff in 2020, and I'm like, I know this is a fake book and it's an alternate reality, but like, no, you wouldn't be doing that. And her son, no, you wouldn't. So yeah, it was kind of nice that this was like a total break from reality in that way too.
Was it in part because of social media though? Because like, I thinking back to 2014, Instagram wasn't as big of a deal as it is now and stuff like that. So maybe she wrote it to circumvent some circumstances she didn't want to write like solutions for.
I will say that if you think too hard at all about any of this magic and the curses and like the like, she can't say his name, her own name, but all of a sudden she can when Henry can say, like, there's a ton of stuff that if you paid a lot of attention, it doesn't make sense. But guys, I don't care. Like, this is not the book. There are books where I care about the magic system and I really want to go into the nitty gritty, but it's a curse. It's darkness. Like, I don't really care about like the nitty gritty of the structure of her curse. Like, we got enough to understand more or less. I feel like readers who are more detailed or who like more detailed magic systems will find this annoying. I was like, cool, I have enough details. Let's move it along.
Yeah. Exactly.
Somebody said like the end wasn't hopeful. And I agree. I just think that it was more like I was expecting death all around. So the fact that that's not what we got, it was like so much, more positive than I expected. When what I expected was nothing. Like, I
Being,
expected the
like-
end to be like, and then she died, and then he died, and then guess what? Darkness is dead. The universe has collapsed. That's what I expected.
There was a
I
time
was like
some-
halfway through the book and like thinking, how is this possibly going to end? Like, I don't see where we're going. I don't understand how it's going to end. But I'm like, everybody has to die. Somebody has to die. And so the fact that that wasn't what happened did make it feel more hopeful.
And I feel like Henry's part was hopeful because, like, finally he felt like he could discover who he wanted to be. He had the time again. Like, does he still have his curse? I wonder. Like, do people still? Or I assume not because Bea didn't have the glass eyes anymore.
Yeah.
Cloudy
So
eyes.
he was back to his normal life, and he felt hopeful about like potentially finding what he wanted to do. Like that was the hopeful part for me. And then the fact that she wasn't trapped forever with Luke, I was like, that's all I could ask for with this book, to be honest.
And the fact that her
Neither
life
of them are
wasn't
dead.
yeah, and her life wasn't invisible. Her life wasn't invisible at the like it, regardless of like I don't know what the number of ways that it could continue to go on with darkness. His curse on her was that she was going to leave an invisible life, and guess what? She found a way to circumvent that, and it was you know through somebody else. It was through this book. People knew her name, and even he came up at the end, and he was like you know clever girl sort of thing. But you found a way out of this, and that was more than I was expecting. Like, so I think that there is a bit of like positive, you know, a positive tint to the end.
Yeah.
Especially because they're not like devastated by their separation. They're both going to learn to live without the other. That part was like sad to see, but like knowing like they're going to move on, they're going to be fine was like nice.
It also fit with the fact that it like this wasn't I don't know they loved each other maybe but it didn't feel like that in your bones like true love like love at first sight thing. It was circumstances that brought them together and I liked them. I was rooting for them, but this idea that okay we'll move on like yeah that fit also like you both will get over this and be fine. So this is not really a question. I just wanted to make mention of it, and I've been seeing people also mention it in the comments. But like, there's a lot of art and like books and museums and stuff that are like scattered. Love of all of art is scattered in here, and some of it again was like, okay, Schwab, like you're doing a little bit too much here. But I will admit that the first few times that I came across like the art descriptions at the beginning of the parts, I scanned by it and I like didn't really pay attention. So it was like part 3 that I was like, the arts are her. And like I went back and I like looked through them and I like put it all together. So it was like a nice moment for me. Sure, it was at the cost of me not paying enough attention, but I did like that portion of it.
I think it took me to the same moment when like the one with the freckles on her face. I'm like, oh, there are pieces that she does. And I even read them when I was reading it.
You read an ebook, right, Jordan? You read it on your Kindle?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was around the 5th part, I was like, oh, there's actually pictures of what they look like.
Really tiny at the top.
I figured it out like sort of right away because of the bird. The bird that she had was like the one from the first one. It's the same thing.
I just thought it was a weird coincidence. Like I'm like, oh, she has a bird. There's a bird. That's weird.
I think that the art stuff and like somebody mentioned how many times we hear about the freckles on her face and stuff like that is just a little bit of like that overwriting that you feel or whatnot, or some of like the more, I don't know, I don't want to say cheap, but like, you know, just like the shortcuts to getting readers involved in your story, like put a bookstore in there and suddenly everybody's like, oh, I love a bookstore. Oh, a bookstore cat. Like it felt like these like, you know, like just like, I don't know, things that you would, I don't know, tropey things that you are kind of all shoved in here, whatnot. But also like they work. I love a bookstore cat. I also love museums. Like it's fine.
I thought in some instances, like the freckle thing, like that really helped to connect a bunch of different storylines together. Like it was used a lot, but it also like was a common thread throughout the whole book.
Yeah.
I feel like it was the name dropping that got to me toward the end when Darkness was like, yeah, this person and this person and this person. Like that part, I was like, okay, we get it now. Like everybody's on their soul, basically.
Or like when he took her to Beethoven to watch Beethoven die.
That was a little much. Yeah, that was very, yeah. That was much. Yep.
That was too much. He's like, climb on, we're going to Beethoven's house.
Yeah. I think honestly, like if she just would have left
And
out
then I
who the
couldn't
people
stop thinking
were,
about
it would have been
Hamilton.
better. It would have been better if she didn't actually mention that was Beethoven, but just made hints that it was Beethoven.
Yes.
Fine. Same thing with like I think Frank Sinatra came up or something.
Yes.
Yep.
That was gonna hit me.
Blue-eyed crooner. Just say that, and we'll all know. And
We'll get it.
So like she
I
almost
think
didn't trust you to be able to figure that out on your own.
Yes, yeah. Somebody said it a little pretentious, a little bit overwritten. So there were definitely moments like that throughout that I was just like eye rolly. But overall, I that's again 4 stars for me, not 5. And the freckle thing, like the constellation that everybody would be like, oh my God, like how big are these freckles? What the heck do they look like? That somebody would be like, a constellation. Like I have freckles and nobody's ever been like 17, beautiful. So that made me like roll my eyes a little bit.
Also, like the whole time I was reading this book, I couldn't not think about Hamilton and like running out of time playing in my head the whole time I was reading this.
It was like whatever the year is that they sing in that one song, like 17, da, da, da. When they were saying it, when they were singing the audiobook, I just kept waiting for that to happen.
When Paris was burning, and it said 1789, I snapped a picture to my sister and I was like, I know why it's burning.
I know, when she's talking about it, I'm like, I can't stop thinking about Lafayette.
Good time.
Anything else that we have not mentioned that you would like to bring up or any? Yep.
Which Chris, what do you want? What do you want, Addie's or what do you want, Henry's? I know what I would say as a type 3. We already know here. Henry.
Okay, so we have this whole thing over on Snark Squad where if you die, I could not even explain where this came from, but it's like a false dichotomy. I know, but if you die, would you choose if you had to live as a ghost to haunt Earth or to haunt space? So we have the 2 different things. Nicole is haunt space, I'm haunt Earth. So my answer is I would do an Addie. Like she had a lot of haunt space in her, haunt Earth in her, just in terms of like, okay, I'm gonna keep living here, like, seeing how the people do. So a year's not enough. And I know 300 is probably too much, but I'd go for too much versus not enough.
Yeah,
Like
I'd also
Henry,
go for too much instead of not enough. Especially like this year, I was like, what if you did that and it was 2020? No, it's not enough. So yeah, I think that would be the same thing. And also, I think I agree with you. I'm also a 3. I'm a 3-wing 4 page. And it would just, I think the fakeness would get to me as much as it got to him. Where I'd just be like,
I'm a 3-wing too. So I'd just be like, if it makes things easier and everybody's happy, then A+, let's go.
Yeah.
I have the same fear as Henry, though. Like, I have a fear of not having enough time to do all the things I want to do. So I definitely wouldn't want to pick only a year. That sounds like, no. I would pick Addie. I would rather be here for 300 years.
So everybody Addie?
Yeah.
That's not it. I'm like, that sounds like too much work having to like steal clothes and No. I want to live a normal life and everybody just likes me. Sure.
I did not think about this like Addie versus Henry, but I did think about like, okay, if darkness came and how would I word my deal to get exactly what I wanted, sort of thing. Like, because people, the whole thing is that at that moment you're desperate and you couldn't say. So you need one in the back of your head just in case.
Right.
So in that moment you could be like, I'm ready for this. I would like.
Did you think of one that you would do?
No, I couldn't. I don't know. I didn't give it that much thought. I was also rushing to finish today, so I'll give it a little more thought. Trying to see. Okay. Anything else that you guys had? Okay. Well, I guess we can announce that for next month, we are reading In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. Yay!
Oh, we are?
Yeah, we are.
I'm actually going to be done on time. I'm already reading it.
Watch Jordan stop reading it today and then finish like.
That happened this time. I was 50% in like last week, and then I read 50% of it today.
Yeah.
Even though we had the whole extra week.
Yeah, we're bad with deadlines. I think it came in, it's coming in the book of the month box as well. So mine is on its way, but we wanted to read something lighter. We'll also be talking a little bit about like our year in reading and looking back at all of the books and talking about favorites and least favorites, but we're going to be primarily reviewing and talking about in the holidays. So I'm excited for that. Like I especially after this, I just give me something like light and fluffy.
Yeah.
Give me a Christmas romance.
For sure.
All right. Well, I think that's it. We did it. Thank you all so much for joining us and for keeping us company. And we will see you next month, end of the month, hopefully. But we'll put the dates and everything on Twitter and on Instagram. And that's it.